Okay. Okay, so we'll start as the time is already. My voice is clear. Okay, fine. Just respond. Yeah. Uh, Today, basically, we will be discussing about case. My voice is clear to you all.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll be continuing. So, good evening, everyone, and hopefully, we'll have some more days of extension of this lockdown period. So, without wasting any much time, so today we will be discussing in this webinar to approach a neonate which we have obtained, and the neonate is tachypnic. So, does the neonate have a heart disease or not? We are suspecting for some heart disease. Does he really have or not? So, this talk will be basically of 20 minutes, which will be followed by the discussion of another 10 minutes. We have experts from different parts of our countries. We have panelists for it. Dr. Kiran is from Ranchi. Dr. Ravi is from Hyderabad. Dr. Priyanka will be there from Kokilabin Dhirubhai Ambani, Mumbai. And Dr. Aslam is there with us, has joined us from Kerala. You can type your queries in the chat box as the lecture goes on. We'll try to sort out the queries in the next 10 minutes. Any other queries which have not been sorted out will be emailed by me. You can email to me your queries and I'll answer them subsequently. So let's think of a situation like we have got a 2-day-old term neonate who has presented, who was of good weight. He is tachypnic, he is a bit tachycardic. He has presented to our emergency room department. There is no obvious clinical cyanosis. On saturation being tested with a saturation probe, we are getting a saturation of around 89 to 90. Because of this tachycardia, the heart rate is around 180. We were not sure of any murmur. There is liver 2 centimeters below the costal margin. So there are points like we are somewhere like in a confused state. This can be a respiratory condition, it can be sepsis, neonatal sepsis, or is it a really heart disease? We are not very sure of it. We should keep congenital heart disease always an option because it is really not so rare as we think of, because the incidence which is in our country is approximately 10,000 live births, and going by the records it is considered as the most common birth defect which we have. So before entering into like what our approach should be, if we are thinking of heart diseases, we have to think if it is a congenital heart disease, if at all, is it a cyanotic or a acyanotic condition? Is their pulmonary blood flow increased or not? Is there pH or not? And is the lesion duct dependent lesion or not? We'll be answering basically these 5 questions as we go down the discussion and try to figure out why are we basically asking these questions, so that what is the importance of these. Before entering into this further, I will just revise the fetal circulation with you all. So as we can see, I'll just share a screen with you all. So this is like a fetal circulation which you all can see here. The lungs will have something called very high resistance. We know that in fetus, the blood does not go to the lungs basically, only 10% of it goes. And it has a high circulation, high resistance. So the blood, the main oxygenator is here the placenta. So it sends the oxygenated blood to the whole part of the body. And this is how it goes. The ductus venosus will take the blood, uh, umbilical vein will take the blood via the ductus venosus. It will go into the IVC, and the oxygenated blood is shunted from the right atrium into the left atrium. And from here, the left atrium, it will go to left ventricle and will go to the upper part of the body through this aorta. Moving on to the other part, so we have talked about two shunts. One was here ductus venosus, which was connecting the umbilical vein to the IVC. Second was foramen ovale. The third shunt, which we'll be saying like the deoxygenated blood, which comes from the SVC, it will go and trickle down from the RA into the RV, and from RV it will go to into the pulmonary artery. But since the lungs have a very high resistance and it is collapsed, this blood will be shunted into the aorta by something called the ductus arteriosus. This is the third shunt which we have at this here. So basically it is a shunt circulation with all these three ducts. and these three drugs are the one which are protecting the, basically protecting the pulmonary blood flow. So moving back to our circulation diagram. So what happens in this case, just as the baby is born, there are a few changes which are important to understand in this case. First of all, this placenta is cut from here. So as the placenta is cut, its resistance in this part will increase. So no blood will flow because there is nothing to flow further. The lungs, as soon as it gets oxygenated blood, the lungs will start expanding. So as it has expanded, there will be more of blood flow flowing into the lungs. So first, ductus venosus is now of no use, it will close. Second, as the lungs have now got blood inside them, they will return this blood into the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. So the left atrium will have a pressure raised. So the foramen ovale, which was here, will be closed because of the flap. And this foramen ovale anatomically will close just within 24 hours of birth, but physiologically, sorry, will close within 24 hours. But around 3 months of life, it will close anatomically. Beware that this foramen ovale is patent even in 20% of the general adult population. It's not that it will close in all the 100% cases. Then we will move on to the third shunt, which was here, ductus arteriosus. This ductus arteriosus normally closes in term babies around 2 to 3 days of life. The importance of why we are discussing fetal circulation here is that there are conditions called duct dependent lesions. The conditions will produce cyanosis, it can produce CHF. So we should be aware when this duct closes. We will discuss how these will present and what will be the presentation like as we go down the list. So moving on to the next part, to our first question, which we are supposed to answer. Is it a congenital heart disease or not? This was the first question. This question needs to be answered because we have to differentiate this heart disease from the respiratory cause which we discussed. Because for a heart disease, you will have to refer your case to a pediatric cardiologist. We all are aware of a test called hyperoxia test, which is there for this. The second, which we have something called NADA's criteria to suspect a congenital heart disease. And of course, echocardiography, which has become popular since last 30 days, results are problem. But this echocardiography might not be available at every places which we are from. So, and we are aware that we have very much scarcity of cardiologists, that too pediatric cardiologists. So we cannot refer every case which we have at the time when we diagnose it or suspect. So we should be aware of how to deal with these situations. So the first test, hyperoxia test, basically important point which I want to emphasize here is that you cannot do this test with a saturation probe. You have to take the ABG for this. So ABG is the important point because you need PO2s to be seen and not SpO2. So you cannot do this test with a saturation probe. You have to take ABGs. At least 2 ABGs will be taken. You will take a ABG of the child in room air. Then you will take the second ABG. Then you give the child 100% oxygen for 10 minutes. A repeat ABG of the child will be done after that, after 10 minutes. And we have to see for the PO2s, not the SpO2. I am again emphasizing. If the PO2s values are going more than 200, then it points towards a respiratory pathology. Whereas if the values are less than 150, it points towards cyanotic congenital heart disease. It is just cyanotic congenital heart disease, not a cyanotic congenital heart disease. So these are like some pointers. These are not the definitive tests. These are pointers. These will help you in your clinics without a echo machine or without a cardiologist. The second thing to suspect is what we know as NADA's criteria. The age-old NADA's criteria, we know that it has major and minor points. Just to remember what these major and minor points are, the major points are 2 symptoms are there, cyanosis and CHF. And 2 examination findings will be there in the form of murmurs only. You have to remember, like any diastolic murmur is pathological, but a systolic murmur which is of higher grade, which is louder. As the grade increases, the murmur becomes louder. So a systolic murmur of grade 3 or more will be coming in the major criteria. Whereas in the minor criteria, 3 points will be in the examination, the first 3 points, whereas 2 points are of investigation. So the first thing which you see for the minor points will be, first of all, you see the vitals. So there will be abnormal BP in this case. The second, you will put your stet. You will look for the heart sounds. So there will be abnormal second heart sound. Sorry. The third will be the systolic murmur. As we have seen in the major criteria, the systolic murmurs were of grade 3 or more, that is the louder murmurs. Whereas in the minor criteria, you have to look for the murmurs which are not loud, which is of grade 1 and 2. So these three were clinical findings. Then you have to see for two investigations. First is abnormal chest X-ray and second is abnormal ECG. Mind you, remember we are not using echo anywhere because these are for clinics, not for echo, which we do in our day-to-day practice. So we need one major or two minor criteria to suffice to suspect a congenital heart disease. It is also not a must here. It's like suspicion of here. Third is echo, we all know. So we need to know the first question is answered with these. Now, after you have answered the first question, we'll move towards our second question. Like if at all the child has a congenital heart disease, is it a cyanotic congenital heart disease or a acyanotic congenital heart disease? So to understand cyanosis, we all are aware that there is something called peripheral cyanosis. There is something called central cyanosis. Peripheral cyanosis is due to the stagnation of the blood. Central cyanosis, basically there is some oxygenation problem either at the level of the lungs or the heart. So lungs, we won't be like lung pathologies, we won't be discussing here. But for heart, you have to remember like central cyanosis, which we are talking about, you have to remember two wonder numbers. Any saturation, first number is 94. Any saturation which is less than 94, mind you, the word is 94. It is less than 94 will be considered as cyanosis. The second number is 85. Any saturation which is less than 85. I am not including 94 and 85 in my definition. Any saturation which is less than 95 can be catched with our naked eyes. We can see cyanosis in a child with our naked eyes if the saturation is less than 85. But if the saturation is between 93 to 85, below 94, then we won't be able to see this saturation difference. So we will have to use something called saturation probe. So this saturation probe is now aware in every nook and corner of our country. Even in small villages I have visited, I have seen that they have this. So it's now recommended also to do the saturation of every neonate before discharging them. So you have to see for the saturation of right upper limb so that you are getting a pre-ductal saturation, and you have to see of any of the lower limb, which will give you a post-ductal saturation values. The third thing, the second thing, which will be like acyanotic and cyanotic conditions. So we now know what is acyanotic, what are acyanotic conditions. Those are those which have a saturation of more than 94, more than equal to 94%. Whereas cyanotics are those which have the saturation below 94%. So what actually produces cyanosis? We have to understand that. So cyanosis, as we said, there is lung pathology, which we won't be indulging into. The second is cardiac pathology, which we have to understand. So in the case of cardiac pathology, basically the oxygenation of the blood occurs in the lungs. So if less blood is going, the deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the right heart. So if less blood is going to the lungs, so it won't get oxygenated. So when will less blood go through the lungs? Either it will have some obstruction here in the form of pulmonary stenosis, all pulmonary atresia, or if the pulmonary arterial pressure is high. We all know that the blood moves from a higher pressure to a lower pressure. So since the pressure of RV is higher than that of the PA, the blood moves from the RV to PA. If there is increased pulmonary arterial pressure, when will this happen? When the pulmonary arterial pressure is high, so the blood won't be able to move properly from RV to PA. It will move forward with some effort. It will take time. Less of blood will move. So less of blood will get oxygenated. Whereas if we move, this is the first condition causing cyanosis. There can be conditions in which mixing of the blood is occurring from the right side going into the left side. So think of conditions like acyanotic conditions. When we think of the things which come into our mind are ASD, VSD and PDA. Just think these conditions. Since in ASD, VSD and PDA, the shunting occurs from the right heart to the left heart, blood moves from the oxygenated chamber to the deoxygenated sample. So our iota, the saturation probe which we put in our peripheries, they will they will not catch these. Whereas if there is shunting occurring from right to left, so this is something called admixture lesion, or there is bidirectional shunting. Shunting is occurring from right to left, shunting is occurring from left to right. So in those cases, there will be mixing of the blood, and some mixed blood will come to LV, which will go to aorta, to the whole body. So there will be desaturation. So the causes of cyanosis causes of cardiac cyanosis will be either the blood is going less to the pulmonary artery in the form of some pulmonary stenosis, or increased pulmonary arterial pressure, or there is some right to left shunting, that is mixing of the deoxygenated blood with the oxygenated blood. You have to understand. So in the cyanotic conditions, this is like something, a table full of literature and all. We don't have to indulge ourselves into this, but we just have to know that if someone asks us about cyanotic conditions, we don't have just ASD, VSD, and PDAs. We have like something called pre-tricuspid, which are above the tricuspid valve, in which ASD comes. We have something called post-tricuspid. Sorry, we have something called post-tricuspid, which are below the tricuspid valve, in which the VSD and PDA comes. So these have been differentiated because they are different from each other. Whereas in the non-shunt lesions, we will have obstructive lesions like coarctation of aorta and regurgitant lesions. These will also be cyanotic conditions, which are due to regurgitation of the different walls. Going on to the cyanotic congenital heart disease, as I told, the first one was due to with low pulmonary blood flow and no PAH, like TOF and TOF physiology. Second will be with low pulmonary blood flow with pulmonary arterial hypertension, which will be like Eisenmenger's. Those with which mixing of the blood is occurring, we call them admixture physiology. So like we have gone, why do we need to differentiate between cyanotics and acyanotics? Because you have to remember one thing, that it is if it is a cyanotic condition, you need to evaluate the person fast. It's not necessary that you will always need to operate or do some intervention at that time, but you need to evaluate that patient fast, because even if we have diagnosed TOF in a neonate, we are not going to change it. We are not going to intervene at that time. Whereas if we are diagnosing like something called TGA or some duct dependent lesions, we have to intervene at the same time. So this thing is important. We need to diagnose all the cyanotic conditions. So we have answered our two questions. First was, is it a heart disease or not? Second was cyanotic or acyanotic thing. The third question which we had to answer was pulmonary blood flow. Is it increased or not? So the features which are suggesting of increased pulmonary blood flow will be like the child will have features suggestive of CHF like tachypnea, tachycardia. There can be hepatomegaly. There will be something called suck rest suck cycle, in which the child suckles intermittently and then stops because of CHF. There will be excessive sweating because there is sympathetic overactivity. The child will not grow properly. There will be failure to thrive, repeated chest infections. These 2 points, last 2 points, are for those children who have grown up, not for the neonates. So you need to answer this if it is increased pulmonary blood flow or not. Why really are we concerned about this? Because this will be like CHF is a catabolic state. The energy will be wasted. The child won't grow and all in this case. And if this keeps on increasing, if the pulmonary blood flow is increased, the child will develop something called pulmonary vascular resistance. It will increase. So that is due to pulmonary arterial hypertension, which is our next question. So after you have seen if the pulmonary blood flow is increased or not, we will see for those conditions. If the pulmonary blood flow was increased, has it developed to pH or not? So like for pH, you will have to see. So we know that pressure is equal to flow into resistance, flow multiplied by resistance. So the pressure pH is pulmonary arterial hypertension basically. So it, as we are aware of systemic hypertension, in the same way pulmonary arterial hypertension is also there when the hypertension develops in the lung fields. So the hypertension in the pulmonary arteries can be due to increased flow through the PS. Increased flow through the PS will be there in shunt lesions like ASDs, VSDs, PDAs. It will be also in those cyanotic heart diseases in which we do not have any pulmonary stenosis, like non-TOF physiologies. If this pulmonary blood flow is keep on increasing for a long time, it will lead to the pulmonary vascular thickening. The anatomy of the pulmonary vascular will change. So it will lead to increase in resistance because the wall will thicken, so the lumen will decrease. As the lumen decreases, the resistance increases. So when the resistance is increasing, it will also lead to pressure increase. But there is difference between the increase in the flow and the increase in resistance. Because if the flow is increasing, we can always revert it back. How will you revert it back? By closing the shunt. You can close a ASD surgically or with device. You can close a VSD. You can close a PDA. But if the second part, which is the obstructive PH develops, that is the resistance increase, you might not be able to revert it back. So it will be like you will have to give some palliative treatment. Those persons which have developed irreversible PAH in the form of PVR, pulmonary vascular resistance has increased, though they have developed obstructive lesions in that case. The last and the fifth question which we need to answer is whether the condition is a duct dependent lesion or not. So what actually are duct dependent lesions? So we know that the ductus arteriosus, which was the connection between our just a sec. Yeah, ductus arteriosus, which was a connection between the aorta and the PA. So that normally closes by 2 to 3 days of life. So these children, be important to note how these children present. So they will be presented to us with like features which are like of increased cyanosis, which will be around 2 to 3 days of life. If it is like duct dependent systemic circulation, like think of this condition in which the descending part of the aorta is not connected with the ascending part. This is something called interrupted aortic arch. So the distal part is supplied by the PDA, patency of the PDA is needed so that the child does not go into shock. So knowing about the duct dependent lesions is also very much important for us. So this is the importance of duct dependent lesions. So we have to answer those 5 questions for us. So the first question which we have to answer is whether it is a congenital heart disease or not. If it is a congenital heart disease, is it cyanotic or acyanotic? If the pulmonary blood flow is increased or not, if the pulmonary blood flow is increased, whether it has developed PAH or not, or is fifth question, last question, is it a duct dependent? So which all babies should be referred to us? So the babies who all cyanotic babies needs to be evaluated. Duct dependent lesions always needs to be evaluated. If the baby is having absence of pulses, not in the upper limb, even in the lower limb, if they are absent, you have to suspect coarctation of aorta. Those babies need to be referred. Those babies who are having congestive heart failure, they need to be referred to us. If a baby is not feeding properly, he has success cycle, there is excessive sweating, there is failure to thrive, failure to gain weight, appropriate weight gain is there, then we will be referring these patients. Before closing the talk, we'll hear something called duct dependent lesions. We should be aware, all of us should be aware of the use of prostin. So prostin is the drug which we use to keep the patency of the drug till any further intervention or surgery can be done for that child. So this is the prostin vial which we can see on the right hand corner of our slide. So this vial is of 1 ml and it contains 500 micrograms. And the dose of prostin which we have to remember is 5 to 15 nanogram per kg per minute. Note that it is nanogram, not microgram. So the dose of prostin is 5 to 10 nanogram per kg per minute. So for a child, like this is the whole of the calculation which I have seen. You don't have to indulge into this. So for a child, you can use, like if you want to give a child a dose of 10 nanogram per kg per minute, what you have to do is to take a value of 0.06 into weight of the child in kilogram. So this amount of ml will go to the child per hour. With a dilution of 1 ml of prostin is to be mixed in 49 ml of D5. You have to first mix this 1 ml of prostin into 49 ml of D5. This dilution you have to use. So if you want to give the child prostin at rate of 10 nanogram per kg per minute, you have to use this formula of 0.06 into weight of the child per hour of this dilution. An important precaution which has to be taken is, like prostin is a drug which causes apnea. This is a very common side effect of this drug. So you should be aware, like if you are starting prostin for a child and you are referring that patient to some cardiac center, you have to take care, respect his respiratory support. If you should start caffeine, you can start aminophylline if caffeine is not available, but you should be aware of the side effects of aminophylline also. On if you don't have aminophylline or caffeine, you should ideally intubate this child and send this child to a cardiac center. So this is an important side effect which is to be kept in mind. And when should we start prostin? Like I don't have an echo machine, I don't know when should we suspect. So in those conditions in which like we are getting a child which is cyanotic, we are able to get, like the child has deteriorated after day 2 or day 3 of life. It was okay in the initial 24 hours, then it deteriorated. We are suspecting heart disease, duct dependent lesion, or the child has developed cyanosis along with this deterioration, or there are failures suggestive of decreased systemic blood flow like shock. Then it's better to start prostin and send, because this prostin will not cause any damage if there are other side effects. But if you don't start the prostin, it will be a lethal thing, because if the duct closes, we cannot save the child and the child will succumb. So coming on to the towards the end of this slide, like so Congenital heart disease, to be kept in mind, is not such a rare thing. It is the most common birth defect. We should always keep a high index of suspicion in these cases. Look for the signs of CHF, cyanosis, murmurs, pulses. Touch the feet of the child. This is a very important teaching which is given by our teacher. Like, you should always touch the feet of the child so that you don't miss coarctation of aorta. This can be easily missed. So you should touch always the feet of your child. You should respect your neonate. SpO2 assessment of preductal and postductal parts of neonates is advisable, rather it is recommended now. And in case you have any difficulty, you should always discuss with your pediatric cardiologist. So, like, in the next 10 minutes, like I have extended my talk a bit. In the next 10 minutes, we'll be discussing the questions I've got with our panelists. So, Mr. Arif, can you unmute our panelists so that we can discuss with them? Unmute our panelists.
All the participants.
Please, panelists, please unmute yourself. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, Dr. Kiran, can you hear me? Kiran sir, can you hear me? Ravi sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to.
Yeah. Sir, please read out the questions which have come. We'll try to sort them out. I can't see the questions on my screen. I don't know what has happened. We'll discuss the questions which has been asked.
Even me.
Yeah. You just read out the questions. We all will hear, and then we'll discuss. Read out the question which is there, sir, which is in the doubt box. I can't see the doubt box.
I'm unable to see the questions.
Okay, Mr. Arif, you can see. Mr. Arif, you can see the questions.
Oh no, I can't see anything.
Yeah, Dr. Aslam, yeah.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, you are
Yes.
audible. You can read out the
Yes,
questions which have been asked.
okay, there is one question.
Yeah.
Actually, he has asked clinically when should we suspect a duct dependent lesion, and is it if it is not a duct, is there anything harm that we can expect after starting the PG? This is
okay. I'll try to sort it out. So
in part we already covered. Also.
Yeah. This part as we told, like clinically, you should suspect a child who was like somewhat okay in the initial 24 hours of his life, and then it started to deteriorate in the form of cyanosis if the child has cyanosis, or if the child is having like shock-like symptoms. Cyanosis will be there in those conditions in which there is decreased pulmonary blood flow. Shock-like condition will be there in those conditions in which there is like duct-dependent systemic circulation. And so, if you are getting cyanosis or shock-like situation, the child has suddenly deteriorated after the initial part. So you should start Prostin in those cases and then refer to the pediatric cardiologist who is near to your center. And you should always be in touch with a cardiologist, rather a pediatric cardiologist, because they can guide you better. So, and there is no harm in giving this Prostin, except that you take care of the respiration of the child, because respiration is to be given. So if you are able to secure the respiration of the child in the form of caffeine, aminophylline, or you are able to ventilate the child and send, if you don't have, then it's fine. There is no harm in starting that. I think that it hopes.
One more question from my side.
Yeah.
Suppose we are starting PG1 infusion, Prostin infusion, and for some reason we are not able to get the procedure done on an emergency basis, and very premature babies or something.
Yeah.
So how long is there any cutoff? Like how long we can continue Prostin infusion?
Yeah, this is really a good question, Dr. Aslam. Actually, this is a common situation which we handle in our scenario. Like the baby could not be, like we have planned for an intervention today and we could not do the intervention because of some maybe even financial issues, or the baby is too short or anything. So one thing you have to understand, that the patent, like the response of Prostin decreases as the child grows. So the response of the prostin will decrease. If you cannot give the prostin to a 1-month-old child, it won't be like beneficial to it. So as the child grows, the response will decrease, first point. And you can always extend, like if you could not do the procedure today and you are planning for after 2 days, you can always continue the prostin, and you can always titrate the dose of the prostin. Like if you started with 10 nanogram per kg per minute and you are seeing that this is not beneficial, you can increase your dose, because the dose will range from 5 nanogram to 100 nanogram per kg per minute. You can always titrate your doses. So you can easily extend, but the response of the prostin will decrease as the child grows. This is an important thing. And one more important thing, like if you are planning an intervention, ideally you should stop the prostin if possible, or come to the lowest level, because if you are planning something like duct stenting for the patency of the duct, this duct will become friable and it will be very much like wide. So your stent, if you are putting, it might float. So that is like something like very intervention will not into that, but you can give prostate. There is no like long-term side effect of it.
Okay, in your experience, what is the longest duration that you has given prostin?
Recently we had a child like 2 months back. That child was of around, we started planned for procedure for that child on day 3rd only, but we could be able to do the procedure on day 18th of life. So
Okay.
it was not that we gave continuous
Around 2
prostate,
weeks.
but it was not continuously for 2 weeks, but actually it needed prostate intermittently, and we never hesitated to stop because we don't have any other option rather than doing this. And we should be aware that we should not give oxygen to these child, because oxygen will cause the constriction of the duct. So it will be like something dangerous for this child.
If you suspect any congenital heart disease like cyanotic child, is there no problem to start prostin? If the child is once you start the prostin, if the child, definitely they'll show the clinical improvement is there. So clinical monitoring is more always you can judge on the bedside. If you start prostin and if the saturations are improving, clinical shock is improving, then then you can need to continue the prostin and care of the mainly airways, apnea and all those things. So if you are referring with a high dose, always better tube the child and send him. If the child is, you are started with a high dose and you are monitoring child is improving, come down on less dose as soon as possible. Then with a minimal dose, once 4 to 6 hours, if you monitor him, then you can refer to the other centers.
Right.
That is the main key point.
Yeah, Dr. Ravi, right. Yeah, this is
Okay,
very important.
There is another one good question from an audience. If in case we don't have a facility for emergency echo, how to differentiate a critical cyanotic lesion from PPHN?
Yeah, very good question. Like in case we don't have an echo, so like critical cyanotic heart diseases and PPHN, you should first look into the scenarios. Like if there is something called meconium aspiration syndrome in the child, in those cases, PPHN you have to suspect in those cases. And second important thing is the like something like saturation difference between the upper limb and lower limb. It will guide you. PPHN children will have more like X-ray suggestive of meconium aspiration syndrome, and you have to see the saturation difference between the two limbs. The saturation difference can be there in even duct dependent lesions also. So with these clinical scenarios and all, I think Dr. Kiran will guide us more into this from the neonatology point of view.
Dr. Murtaza, now we have less than a minute.
There is a question.
Sorry. You all are advised to mute your. Everyone should be muted except the panelists, so that we can hear everyone.
Dr. Murtaza, now we have less than 1 minute. Please conclude this session. We have less than a minute. Hello. Yes.
So, yeah, Dr. Kiran was concluding his talk. We'll just do that with his answer. Yeah, sure. Dr. Kiran, can you hear me? Okay, I
Dr.
think
Murtaza, please conclude this.
Yeah. Actually, we have a time limit in this, so I'm very sorry for this, because this was the basic version of Zoom. You all can email me to murtaza.vmmc, murtaza.vmmc@gmail.com. All your queries, we'll try to answer them in the next 48 hours. I hope that should be fine. Yeah. I think the time is going to end. Yeah, it will be there. Okay. Thank you all of you for participation. I know your queries are still there. You can always email me and we'll try to sort them out. Okay, bye bye.